had to do this from the van because it's so hot out and the mosquitoes are very bad. But I wanted to talk to you about how God speaks to you. And there's basically three ways: your inner intuition, where the Spirit speaks to your soul, or your inner man, if you will. There's circumstances and events that line up to show you that you're going in the right direction. And sometimes this can be a little difficult because you might get hindrance from going where you want to go. You might have to persevere, but if it eventually doesn't work, you have to just end it. And the third way is flipping randomly through the scriptures. Now, this doesn't always work, and it can be considered circumstance. But I found that whenever I really needed a word, I flip right to the scripture that I need. And I find that the New Testament is probably the best place, and some of the Old Testament stuff, out of all of the spiritual or religious documents of the world, the New Testament and the Old Testament, you just can't compare. It really does relate to your everyday life and to real world events. But related to yesterday's program, all week I was really hesitant about putting that out because, I didn't want to really seem like I was judging an elder and falsely making misstatements about an elderly man. Also, when you talk about money, they don't take that very kindly. So I was a little concerned about that. And the third one was, should I really be talking about politics as it relates to spiritual principles? And I guess we can overdo that. And like Jesus said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's. But I look around me in the world and I see people suffering, and I recognize why they're suffering, and then I see a program like that and I just have to put it out. So I put it out hesitatingly, and this morning I just flipped through the scriptures like I've been doing every morning now, and I opened to Matthew 17, and it spoke exactly to what the program was about. So I'm going to read that here. Very interesting. And it confirmed, whether it was coincidence or not, it teaches you something about life. When Jesus and the apostles came to Capernaum, those who collected the 2 drachma tax came to Peter and said, "Does your teacher not pay the 2 drachma tax?" Peter said yes, but when he came into the house, Jesus spoke to him and said, "What do you think, Simon? From whom do the kings of the earth..." Well, today, in today's terms, politicians or financial leaders, from whom do they collect tax? From their own sons or from the people? When Peter said, from strangers, and the people, of course. Can you imagine? This is what's going on today. That's what's going on then. Jesus says, well, I guess the sons are exempt. The ruler's sons are exempt from paying tax. Okay, then it goes on to say, at that time the disciples came to Jesus and said, "Who then is greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And Jesus called a child to himself and set him before them. "Truly I say to you, unless you are converted and become like children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven." So this is what we all need, and we hope for our leaders and our financial leaders to be converted and become like children. But then you say, well, what does it mean to become like a child as an adult? And there it is in the second following lines, and that always is the case, usually. Following is the answer. "Whoever then humbles himself as this child, he is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." Humility. The humility to recognize when you're wrong, to admit it, and to change what you're doing. This are the attributes of a child who will enter the kingdom of heaven. "Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me, but whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble." And in this context, stumbling means to get people to believe in, they have to have the things of the world. They have to have the new car and a new house. See, that's through advertising. Getting them to stumble, believe in the worldly things. And then they get into debt and have to work all the time. And then they miss the kingdom of God. Whoever causes one of these to stumble, it would be better for him to have a heavy millstone hung around his neck and to be drowned in the depth of the sea. Can you imagine? This is it. If you're one of the financial leaders causing somebody to stumble and miss the kingdom of God, woe to the world because of its stumbling blocks. It is inevitable that stumbling blocks come, but woe to that man through whom the stumbling block comes. Then he goes on to speak to them and us. If your eye causes you to stumble, which means if you're thinking, if you see things in the world that you've got to have, that are going to put you into debt, it's better to pluck it out and throw it from you. It is better for you to enter the life of the kingdom of God with one eye than to have two eyes and be cast into the fiery hell. Of course, this is not literal. It's just speaking of the seriousness of the matter. You know, you don't want to stumble and think the things of the world and what you have to have and then miss the kingdom of God. Then he goes on, and then he gives us hope, as he always does. The hope of redemption, the hope of reconciliation. Jesus says, what do you think? If any man has 100 sheep and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountain and go search for the one that is straying? If it turns out that he finds it, truly I say to you, he rejoices over it more than the 99 which have not gone astray. So it is not the will of your Father who is in heaven that anyone should perish. It's not the will of God that we should perish, that we should stumble and think the things of the world are what we have to have, or to cause people to stumble. Then it gives us instruction. If your brother sins, go and show him his fault in private. If he listens to you, you have won your brother. If he refuses to listen, let him be to you as the lost and as a tax collector. So we have the possibility of redemption. We must be humble. We must have the humility of a child, and in order to inherit the kingdom of God. And wake up to the stumbling blocks of advertising and the financial networks and the system that's trying to entrap you into debt, into servitude. To look at the things of the world with your eyes is what you got to have, rather than the kingdom of God within and the kingdom to come. So that's it. Read the scriptures, develop your intuition, the voice of God within, and look at your circumstances if you want to hear and know the will of God. He's there. Just a matter of practice, prayer and meditation, quietness, becoming as a little child.